Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episode, and this is very important. Even the COVID-19 situation, especially Asia Pacific, we are struggling a lot for COVID. Many people died, not only in Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, even in Bangladesh. Every country has a lot of challenges. They have a lot of trouble. Beside COVID, there is another problem: unemployment. Majorly problem every day. Even today, we get a call from different governments and corporations that how they can solve this problem. It's actually major problem, and around the world, 40% people actually live in Asia Pacific, in India, China, and this in the region there are many huge amount of people. 57 to 60% actually youth. So they are highly affected for these unemployment issues. We are advocating modern science, modern engineering, and technology. So definitely we want to solve this unemployment problem. What we are offering, like for our university degrees, we are 100% offering for creating more employment, as well as we already contract with many corporations in an emergency basis if we can create more employment for the youth community. And beside that, we have our expert panelists, those who have excellent analysis and point of view about different things. So hopefully we can get some insight. Not only this insight we will get from discussion, we will apply it. Our major challenges that we need to apply all of your thought and process. So that's why World Talent Economy Forum, with government, with corporations, with the academia, we are day and night we are working. We have our strong team, need more of your support for solving this unemployment economic challenge, especially COVID-19 situation really horrible. Many people dying, it's unimaginable. So I think we need global collaborations. So Professor Rob, I want to start from you. How do you want to analyze to this topic?
Well, unemployment's kind of a broad topic. It has two aspects, of course: the individual being unemployed, and underemployed or unemployed, or a society which has to deal with a lot of people with lots of free time. They don't have the money to enjoy that free time. So it's both a personal and a societal problem. As you look at unemployment broadly, it really varies state to state as to the cause, but generally it's a mismatch between the jobs that are available and the people trained to do those jobs. So you can have both underemployment, in other words, a lot of jobs that are open, and unemployment, a lot of people that don't have jobs in the same environment. In fact, here in the United States, it's not an uncommon situation to have. In fact, it's kind of, just as a side comment, it's kind of amazing because we have all these jobs, relatively low-paying jobs currently that are being unfilled. So clearly, no domestic workforce that wants to do them. We have immigrants that seem to want to do those jobs, but we don't want to let them in so they can do the jobs either. It's like, we don't want them, but you can't have them either. It's a very bizarre mindset. But governments have bizarre mindsets. It's just the way of the world. If you're going to fix unemployment, you have to first analyze where your causes are. What's the issue in Central and South America? A lot of the unemployment is being created by the increasing loss of arable land, which is putting lots of farmers out. And the farmers, of course, produce the food, and the food doesn't get to the stores. The food that is in the stores goes up in price. People can't afford the food, and you get this vicious cycle. But that's Central and South America. If we move to Asia, appears to be a mismatch of the capability of the state or the organization to train people, and an inability to bring jobs into the country. So you get a lot of people that are unemployed. You get a lot of unrest. That unrest keeps businesses from coming into your environment. Once again, that means you don't have the jobs. And the people are unemployed. The unemployed people are disgruntled. The disgruntled people revolt or create problems. The businesses don't come in. You don't get the jobs. Once again, a vicious circle. And so if you want to fix the problem, you have to understand the vicious circle you're in, and then resource addressing the core issues with regard to that circle. If it's farming created in the loss of arable land, maybe consider funding and going to factory farms. If it's a mismatch of training and people and unrest, that's a bigger problem, because you almost have to solve the unrest before you can bring in the business, but you can't solve the unrest until you actually have the job. So So part of what you've got to do is somehow you've got to create a partnership with industry, and maybe create safe havens, areas in the country where companies can come in and operate safely with higher levels of protection, so they don't have to be concerned about the unrest, and particularly don't have to be concerned about if they're successful having their industry nationalized, which often is a problem in some of these areas. If somebody comes in and is very successful, then the government nationalizes them, and now it scares off the rest of businesses. So you need a strategic plan. You need to understand the causes of the problem, and that strategic plan has to, over time, address those causes. And of course, the one other problem I'll leave you with is the fact that governments don't think strategically very well. They're very tactical organizations. And so you have a mismatch of the capability of government and the need for government to operate in a way that they are not really set up to operate. So this is not an easy one to solve.
Thank you. Professor Edward, how do you want to analyze to this topic?
Well, in one sense, it's a modern problem, unemployment, because throughout most of human history, people had to work pretty much all of their waking hours just to get enough food to survive. And of course, many of them didn't. And so you had incredible famines and millions of people dying. So in a sense, this is a modern problem. But the thing is, when you talk about unemployment, you're really talking about just one aspect of a broader picture. And I want to make 4 points about that, because I can't stay on as long as I'd like to. I'll hit these 4 points right up at the front. First of all, it's the way you think about a job and employment. Too many people think about a job as like a thing here. So I have this job, it's my concrete little thing, and I'm worried someone's going to take it away from me, or maybe it's going to drop and smash, and that's going to be, or it's spilling on me right now, that sort of thing. And that's not the way to think about the issue. Here's how I think about the issue. Human beings throughout history have produced goods and services value for themselves, and so that they could trade with other people to get things that they need. A farmer produces crops. He or she takes some of those crops and trades it with the woman who makes a shirt. So he gets a shirt, she gets some food. Maybe he trades it with someone making furniture. But what everyone is looking to do is to become more productive, so they can produce more stuff, more crops, more shirts, whatever it is, so they can trade it for more stuff with the other productive people. And you have this competition. And technology, of course, is the thing that in the last 200 years has had this burst of productivity, so that everybody's labor becomes more valuable. My father was a bread truck driver, and he was a hard worker, a decent man, still is in his retirement, but he probably didn't work any harder than a peasant in Europe in hundreds of years ago. It's just that our economies are so much more productive. He could trade his labor and his training and his smarts, because it took smarts to sell the bread in order to raise 6 children. That's the way to think about employment. And throughout history, it's been that aspect that is in that employment, in other words, is a productive relationship between individuals producing goods and services to trade with one another. That's what a job is. It's a productive relationship. That's point number 1. Point number 2, the situation is always changing. As people become more productive, as their needs change, as their desires change, then the productive needs change. At the beginning of the 20th century, almost half of the American population was engaged in food production and farming. Today, it's about 1.5%, something like that. Isn't it terrible that we lost all those farmers? No, it simply means that people are making other stuff. Farming has become, and food production has become so efficient that most of us don't have to worry about starving. In fact, the big problem in the United States is obesity and bad diets and things of that nature. There are no typists today in big companies. 40 or 50 years ago, you had, hundreds of typists in big corporations. Today, you don't have any. What you do have is you have techs, because everyone has PCs and are doing it ourselves. And of course, exponential technology means that this process of change, which usually takes place over decades or even centuries, takes place very, very quickly. The needs of the market, the needs of people who pool their resources. They're called businesses. Change more quickly. The third point I want to make is that we have to, in order to address the problem of employment or unemployment, we have to have a mind change. People have to have a mind change. We have these unfortunate Marxist stereotypes of, well, you have the owner and the manager, and then you have the worker over here and so forth. Each and every one of us is the entrepreneur of our own lives. I hope all your listeners right now in the Asia Pacific area understand we are the entrepreneurs of our own life. Just as an entrepreneur in the market pulls together resources to produce goods and services, we do that with our own lives. We are all managers of our own time. We are all investors in our own talent, in our own education. We have to think of ourselves as active agents, not passive. Well, I'm sitting around waiting for someone to hand me the job. Here it is right here. You take it, you pick it off the tree. That's not the way to think about it. The fourth thing then, getting down to your question about addressing unemployment, I'll give you some broad principles and then we can get into details in our later discussion. The fourth issue I want to bring up is the incredible disconnect between public policy, regulations, and especially education and training, and the needs for people to have productive jobs. In the United States, and Rob sort of pointed this out, we had this incredible disconnect. Before the pandemic, there were 1.6 million more job openings than there were unemployed Americans. Everyone should have had a choice of a job. They should have a choice of two jobs. It's just that there's an incredible disconnect between what the schooling system does and what businesses need. One of the things when I was getting into public policy, this is 30 some years ago, I talked to business people about their problems. I expect they would say, well, the taxes are too high or something like that. Those were issues, of course, as well. But their big thing is we can't find the workers with the talent that we need. That was a big problem. The education system is baroque and broke. That's the first big problem we have to address, because the disconnect between business needs, entrepreneurs, and talent. Regulations are another big problem in most countries, including the United States. I remember, for example, France wanted to try to solve its unemployment problem in the early noughts, 2002, 2003, by mandating a reduction in working hours. And they figured, well, if we just cut back working hours, then all the companies are going to have to go out and hire more people. So we'll have more workers. And of course, it didn't work like that, because the French businesses, it wasn't like they could simply take money off of a tree and give it to those new workers. What happened was unemployment got even worse. And you had business people meeting secretly to plan business, because you had police literally going around saying, you're working too much. Just in absolutely stupid policies. You have minimum wage laws in this United States. There's been a big boom in technology right up and down Rockville Pike where I live, because when they started to raise the minimum wage here in Maryland, what happened was that we had all these kiosks and automatic tellers going into grocery stores and to fast food restaurants, because they just couldn't afford the workers. By the way, in a productive economy, usually a minimum wage issue isn't a big issue, because in the 1980s in this country, in most entry-level jobs, wages were higher than minimum wages dictated by the government, because there was such a demand for workers. But that's a problem you have as well. And I could go over other problems. The other two issues that I'll mention is, well, what do you do about it in the long run? One thing is to change your education system, to have a continuing education system. We have an unemployment system right now that's basically, once you're the government takes money out of your paycheck. Once you're unemployed, the government dribbles some of it back to you, okay? But there's no incentive or even possibility of you continuing your education and training to look ahead to say, I'm in a really good job right now. I'm not sure what's going to be like 2 years, 3 years, 5 years from now. So maybe I should subscribe to a system where I can get continuing education. Right now, we don't have that sort of system in this country. Apprenticeships is another great way. And this is something, Sharif, I want to compliment you on. What you're interested in doing is working with businesses and educators so that you can bring these things together. And that's really part of the key. Because as I've said right up front, the big problem is the disconnect between the training and education system and the needs of the market. And in Switzerland, for example, 70% of kids go through some kind of apprenticeship program. It's a tryout for a job. So they try out not just in carpentry or plumbing, but pharmaceuticals, finance, technology, all of these kinds of things. They've got something like 200 categories in Switzerland. It's happening here in the United States. We're starting to get this sort of thing where businesses and educators team up. And so the businesses are able to get, train kids, offer them jobs right out of college, or maybe they don't go to college. Maybe they just take certain focused courses and then go straight into the business. There's a great model that if you're a policymaker in Asia Pacific, you're going to have the immediate problem of job loss because of COVID. But you really have to think in the future. You have to think about the incentives and the system that you have. Don't copy the failures of the West. Think about what Sharif is doing here, what the Swiss are doing. There's a thing called CareerWise Colorado that was set by a Democrat and by somebody else. So it's not just a Republican or Democrat thing. Think of that kind of dynamic way of dealing with exponential technology that's going to change our job markets very, very fast in the future. And so I hope that frames the issue, and I'll be able to listen to a few of you before I have to jump off for another call here. But this is a very important issue, and I'm looking forward to working with you in the future on helping out in your countries.
Thank you, Professor Edward. Professor Donald, how do you want to analyze to this topic?
Well, I really want to thank previous people for covering some important points. It's like, the problem with it is just talking about it is that it's a geographic issue. Look, I got practically no sleep last night. My coffee hasn't kicked in, but
same here. I was up till 4 a.m.
Yeah, but what happened? I mean, unemployment is much, much, much worse in Somalia and other countries with very unstable governments, as Rob pointed out. And when you look at a country as big as the United States, if you talk about unemployment, you can come up with numbers that actually hide the reality. Unemployment is very, very high in Racine, Kentucky, but unemployment is very, very low in other places. And so we can look at all the people who need workers and say, oh, these people need workers, and the big problem is this or that or the other thing. But one of the things that gets hidden is the fact that in some areas there's jobs, and some areas people need workers. So if you're poor and uneducated, it's pretty tough to move to Silicon Valley and nab a job at Facebook. But and as Edward points out, not everybody's cut out to be a computer software engineer, and there's a lot of other things that we need to have people do. In the United States can form a cautionary tale for other countries, and then I'll mention the cautionary tale. Right now, they have a free open market in telecom in France. And in France, they have the cost of cellular service is 1/4 of what it is in the United States. And it's just as good as it is in the United States. And part of the reason is in the United States that we allow monopolies. And so some of the monopolies have gotten so big that they're jacking up prices. So I just wanted to defend France a little bit there. France also, and again, if you look at France, they have an issue that for years, anyone in any French territory was a French citizen. So a lot of people moved to France from countries in Africa and the Middle East and things like that. And they're very segregated. So they have areas like surrounding Paris where people are poor and have trouble being able to get work the way other people do. And so that's what I'm meaning about geographic things kind of hiding what's actually going on. If you're basically white and well-educated in France, you're going to have no trouble getting a job. So, but I was working with a group that was trying to help Syrian orphans in Beirut. And I got to learn quite a bit about what was going on in Syria. And interestingly enough, one of the things that happened in Syria was that they had a very bad drought for several years. And it basically made it so the farmers couldn't earn a living anymore. And so they moved to the cities, and they were very much second-class citizens. They were looked down on. It's a common thing. Like when I was in Finland, the people from Helsinki kind of looked down on the people from the country. And certainly in India, I was talking to a friend who was saying, "Oh, well, she's a country girl. I would never go out with her." And so there's all these prejudices that exist, and basically these people are, especially because they're Syrians in Beirut, they can't work. And what I'm trying to say, or what I'm trying to say, is that unemployment and employment is a regional problem, and every different region has different problems, and they could be prejudice, they could be lack of resources, they could be unstable governments, autocratic governments that basically grab all the resources, like in a lot of African countries and Middle Eastern countries, the resources are controlled by a small group of people, in the United States as well. And so it's hard to make a general solution to unemployment. So we talk about education, but we have to be careful when we're talking about education that we don't unintentionally form a hierarchy where people with certain types of education are high status and people with other types of education are low status. So what Rob was saying about Switzerland, or actually Germany and other countries like that, they have tracks for people to become maybe master carpenters through a journeyman system, and they're highly respected. But in fact, in New York City, there's people whose family have been basically waiters for generations. And if you try and go to a restaurant in Palo Alto or anywhere around here, the servers are okay, but they're usually college students or something like that who are working a part-time job, and they're just looking to get out of it. I mean, that's not what they want to do. But in New York City, the service is so good that you just can't even believe what's happening to you. And that's because being a waiter for years and years is a respected profession. Being a doorman is one of the best jobs in New York City, because you get to meet all these people and you get tips, and it's people wait in line for years to try and get a job like that. So just talking about education might be missing the point. And I'll say more about it as I wake up a little bit more later, but my main point here is that it's not something that you can focus on as a general problem. It's something that you have to talk about specifically at every region and every locale.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Professor David Smith?
Very important topic, and as we look through the world with what's happening around the different elements, one of the things I've seen, particularly in developing nations, is chronic youth unemployment. And as you begin to talk about strategies around that, it's important for countries to understand why that is and what's going on, putting the youth in that type of situation. Donald talked about the education. As you begin to look at education, though, it plays into some of the other elements on there. You begin to look at the financial stability of the country, the region, the cities, where it is. In some places, there you have to even go back and look at the mental issues, the physical health issues, the type of discriminations, particularly gender discrimination, discrimination between the different groups within the society. Um, there really is also structural differences that really go and impact unemployment and how those go. But the cause effect side goes even much further. In areas where there is chronic unemployment, you see lower life expectancies. You see, of course, more poverty, but you see more drug abuse. You see more, uh, I guess, social isolation because of it. The effects on kids, the economic effects on both the families, the businesses, and the government, because you cannot generate more money with very high chronic unemployment. And also how it goes over into the criminal side too, where you have this type of chronic unemployment with the weak economic conditions around it, your crime rates is going to go up quite a bit too. And so it's an area that just lends itself for work across all the sectors to look at solution space for it. Um, One of the things we've learned a lot in the Western civilization is, once again, like so many things, unemployment is not one size fits all. And a government trying to address it needs to understand that. As Donald said, it's not just the education you can throw at it. You have to put a myriad of other services and capabilities around it. One of the things I see in some of the countries we're working with, one of the problems that causes unemployment is the lack of transportation and the lack of easy transportation to get to where the jobs are. And part of that could be public policy as well. One of the things that there's considerable debate on here is whether the governments should do large tax incentives to help companies relocate. But part of the thing with tax incentives is helping to control where those companies locate within your region. And I've seen that used fairly successfully lately to spread not only where the manufacturing is, but the type of manufacturing. I've mentioned on prior shows that just down a toll road from me is the Tesla, one of their gigafactories going in. Across from that is one of the manufacturing buildings for the space program that Elon Musk is doing. Those have brought manufacturing jobs into place, high-tech jobs into place, chemistry professional jobs into place where they were not before. And so it was a way to broaden the access to a variety of jobs to help the population raise the level. And that's one of the things you need to do when you address the problems around unemployment is it's not just one type of jobs. You know, Donald's talking about Silicon Valley. I was on one of the joint venture Silicon Valley advisory boards. And it was very interesting when you look at the diversity of the types of jobs in Silicon Valley and that they were not very diverse and it overly concentrated. So Silicon Valley became more susceptible to ups and downs in the economy in different industry segments. If I'm a nation state looking at a way to address unemployment across the nation. That's part of the thing too. It's great having specialization regions, but if you overly specialize in a industry or a type of job, it's going to be more susceptible to disruptions in that industry.
Mhm.
So you begin to see those type things. But to me, again, it's a complicated area, and it's not one size fits all.
Mhm.
Thank you so much, and I
Thank you.
apologize for being late.
No problem. Thank you. Professor Talib, can you hear me? Professor Talib, can you hear me? I think he cannot hear me clearly. Mr. James, can you please discuss on this unemployment solution?
Sure, and you can cut to Professor Talib if the opportunity presents itself at any time. Thank you for this opportunity to speak on this subject. And Edward said, I thank the previous speakers too for setting the table so well. And some of the things that Edward said, I agree with wholeheartedly. Being empowering people to take charge of their own lives is a great message. Some of the things I said he said that were quite objectionable to me, and then he disappears, so I can't. But we have had this discussion in the past, face to face. So, but that somehow Marxism has become a four-letter word in society, and it's usually used by people who have never studied. And I don't mean just like Das Kapital. I mean all the essays that Marx wrote, that Engels wrote, and then some of the critiques of them, and some of the people that champion them. And it takes a lot of work. And do you have the time, energy, and opportunity to do this kind of study? Hard study. These are not easy essays all the time. This isn't, Mary Had a Little Lamb kind of reading. So this is something that I would encourage people to do if they have the opportunity. And I think this is the thing that I object to the most, is that not everyone has equal opportunity. So when he was talking about some of these things that are available to certain people, they're not available to all. This is an important point to mention. Not everyone has the same opportunities. He describes the society when I work with people in Uganda, in Bhutan, in Zambia, in an impoverished area of Cape Town, South Africa. They don't have the chances. And even in the United States and in New York City, you mentioned obesity. Well, it's a food desert where they live. They don't have the ability to drive or to go to some places where food is fresh, affordable, and nutritious. So they go to get calorie-rich and nutrient-poor food, and they become obese. I've heard people say, "Oh, I would love to be poor in the United States because everyone's fat." Well, that's because they're not getting good food, and they don't have the opportunity to get good food. So yes, obesity is a huge issue in this country, but not necessarily for the reasons you think. It's not gluttony in all cases. It's people that are hungry and only have access to bad food. So we have to be a little bit more compassionate and not treat everyone as a statistic. And we talked a little bit about immigration, and I still can't understand. The people are coming to the country to do jobs that we wouldn't do, start businesses that we wouldn't start, and we're against it. Why? I'm not quite sure. I figured it out. And my grandparents were born in the United States, but their parents were not. And when they came, there were signs in the stores that say Irish need not apply. So this isn't new. But and the Irish could get away with it if they didn't open their mouths. But once you open your mouth, they knew you were Irish. So you didn't have the opportunity to work. So they ended up being beat policemen, kinds of things that other people didn't want to do. And that's the way things have been working for a very long time. Now, the Irish got assimilated when the Italians came over, and the Italians were darker skinned, and so the Irish became more acceptable. And this is kind of the way it's working for a long, long time. And yeah, and as Donald pointed out, in the old days, you talked about, they were working really hard, yet, but when the sun went down, they went to sleep. There was a lot more rest and relaxation in those days than there is today, because now, and I did it, you can work practically around the clock, because the sun could go down, the sun can come up, and I wouldn't know. So I was detached from nature, and so I didn't live by nature's rules. Mm-hmm. So, the opportunity is not equal. We can't treat it, we can't pretend that it is. Not all people have the ability to do these things as well. Not everyone's cut out to be an entrepreneur. And so when we talk about this anti-Marxism kind of thinking, and some of it's well-founded, some of it is not, there's also this unregulated free market cult that's out there, and we don't talk about that. This unregulated free market capitalist society is got its sown its own seeds of destruction. So we require regulations, but I hear all the time, regulations are bad. No, there's never been a society without regulations, of course, and sometimes we call them tribal customs, but it's always been there, because there are things you should not do, and you would do if you were allowed to. So we have to have regulations that will prevent you from doing them. And, that's kind of what the cost of joining a society is. And, because you need to join a society because you can't make it alone. You can't do these things alone. So you have to work with others, and that requires compromise. That requires respecting the rights of other individuals besides yourself. And we're not so good at that. We're rights conscious in terms of ourselves, but we're not so rights conscious in terms of the effect of our behavior on others. So these are some of the points that I wanted to make. And also the topic of education is very important. And there's, but we don't want to allow education to be substituted for the word indoctrination. We don't want to indoctrinate people in a way of believing and thinking and behaving, because indoctrination has taken over education in some societies throughout history. And we want to avoid that. So I say, if you're going to make a mistake, err on the side of freedom, free thought, free thinking, free trade even, but always be prudent in what you're doing, and know that you don't know everything, and there are going to be unanticipated consequences, and be prepared to be wrong. And you might find that keeping that in mind will help you make better choices, better decisions. So the last thing I want to say is that appropriate technology, and this is what Donna was talking about, region to region, it's different. Apply the appropriate technology to where you are, what's available to you. And when learning, the job opportunities will come. And what Edward said about he used the word apprentice, but interns, you can do internships. These are tremendous, valuable opportunities to get out there and really do the work when you're young. And this is a great learning opportunity, and it's available more than we take advantage of. Thanks, Sharif. Sorry to go on and on.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I think Dr. Talib trying to join in the session. I just want to give him a chance. Professor Talib, can you hear me?
I can hear you now, but my connection is very, very bad. Keep cutting off.
Understand. Professor, we are discussing on unemployment solutions. So you are a very successful politician. You run very interesting things. Even ILO, international level organization, you also run. So what is your perception about these unemployment solutions, and how we can overcome from this situation, especially in the COVID situation, unemployment is increasing.
Oops. We lost him again.
Yes. I think
we all want to hear from him, Sharif, but it's live. Welcome to live television. Yeah.
Yes, actually, internet has some problems. So in that situations, I think he also is trying a lot.
Can
Professor
you hear me
Talib?
now?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I've been listening a little bit to what's been said by Don and our good friend Jane, and I agree completely. We live in an unfair world. Unfortunately, the world is not run by the same standards, by the same rules for human beings. This is a problem. But I want to talk about a specific thing here, about jobs. Like what kind of jobs are we looking for? If we're looking for jobs just
Oh, I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry because he's very vital guest for us because he also run International Labour Organization. Maybe we can get some great insight from him. So in that situation, Professor Rob, if you just
Fill the space until he comes back. Yes, I get my role here.
Can you now hear me?
There we go.
yes,
Okay, I'm sorry
Yes.
about this. The connection seems to be very, very bad. It's okay.
yes,
That's part of the unfair world because we don't have the same Wi-Fi everywhere. And people are assuming that technology will solve all our problems. It won't. I want to talk about investments and how investors come to certain areas and not connect with the local community there. When they come there and just provide jobs for people, that alone is not enough. Because
I'm really sorry about that.
Smoke
Yes, Mr.
signals next. We'll go to smoke signals next.
Okay.
We're all sorry about it. We love hearing it.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm really sorry because
Absolutely.
even
I'm sorry.
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry too.
no problem,
I'm
no
sorry.
problem. Please continue. Yes,
Okay. What I'm saying is providing jobs, big jobs for big companies is not enough anymore. You have to help create jobs in the communities themselves. Self-employment is the key for all of this. If a company comes in a certain area, provides jobs, people living there now would like these jobs, but their children and grandchildren would always say, what is this for us? And there will be a time where they will compare their lifestyle with those of the people that are employing them.
What's sad is he's very concise and brief in his comments, but we can't even keep the line up long enough for him to get through them.
It's so
Here we
true,
go.
Rob.
I'm so sorry about this.
no problem, no problem. Please, we can understand. Please
I
continue.
don't know what to do anymore. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
Can you hear me?
yes.
Okay. What I'm saying is that, let's say a resort comes to a certain area and starts employing the people in that area. They bring the people in the morning and they leave them, let them go back to their homes in the afternoon. The people of that resort never go visit those villages.
I'm really sorry about that. So, Professor Donalds, you want to add some point?
I think Rob was next. He was the fill-in, first fill-in.
Yes. Actually,
Do you want,
It's okay now?
yes,
It's okay now?
well,
Yes.
no, your lips aren't moving. You've still got it.
Okay.
You're going to drop in a minute.
What I was trying to say is, if we create job opportunities, by big companies to come to attract people from the neighborhood to come and work with us, that won't work. That won't work. It would work for one generation. The next generation is going to say, we're not going to spend our lifetime serving the rich people of the world, to go back every day to our homes and find out the difference in our standards of living. What you need to do is impose some.
Told you.
I'm really sorry. So, Professor Rob,
Yeah.
I think that yes.
Let's talk about the benefits of Starlink and internet connection. So the
That's exactly what I was thinking too. Let's give him a Skylink connection.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. I hope I made my point clear.
I don't think it was the point you wanted to make, but yeah.
I heard that big
Okay.
companies coming in
What I'm
providing jobs is not
what-
good enough.
Yes,
It only
Professor.
works for
It's
one
not.
generation.
Because what they need to do is impose some system that creates
Mhm.
in the communities themselves.
Mhm.
Yes, that's right.
Mhm.
Now, what we need is have people their own jobs by the fact that
We may be developing a whole new skill set, how to understand a sentence in 3 words.
Okay. Yes, Professor Rob. Yes, I think you want to discuss on Starlink and the.
Well, no, I was just saying that internet connection now becomes kind of critical. I wonder if we could fall back on a landline phone line to do this.
this is not
And
working.
how would you build
It's not working. I'm
community
sorry.
job?
Yeah.
Yes, Professor Talib, can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, I can hear
Maybe.
you. I can hear you now.
Okay, there we go.
Okay.
Okay. Yes.
What I mean to say is, let's say a resort. If the people of that resort leave the encouraged by the owners to leave that resort and go visit the village, we create their own cafes, their own restaurants, their own coffee shops, their own shops to sell souvenirs. That's the way to create real jobs with dignity, the people with respect.
Okay. I'm really, really sorry for this technical problem. But
Yep.
anyway, Professor Rob, I think you just
Okay,
finished
so
your
let's
points.
talk about how you go about solving this at a government level. First, you need to create a hierarchy of what you can do and what has what would have the greatest impact on the problem. Oh, he's back.
Yes.
Hang on.
Yes. I think you're right, Rob. I heard you a little bit. Okay.
So
That's what I want to
anyway,
say.
go ahead.
To create an environment that will benefit directly from the of the world.
Thank you,
Corporate social
Professor Rob.
responsibility is not just paying money anymore.
Okay, I think he brings points on corporate social responsibility. So what the internet companies actually, they can help us, at least for getting the better internet connections around the world.
Right.
Professor Rob, you are expert.
Right. Well, so back on creating a hierarchy. What can you do quickly, and what will have the biggest impact on the underlying problem? For instance, it looks like the easiest path initially would be just create a system where you can identify people that are being underemployed. In other words, you have job openings, you have people that have the skills, you're just not able to connect the 2 dots. And so creating a system where those people can be aware of the jobs that are open, and the government then assists them in traveling or doing whatever they need to take those jobs within the country. And then build that hierarchy across to what are your long-term skill needs, and making sure that the mechanism is in place to train the people, the citizens that you have, either domestically or overseas, and bring them back to fill those jobs in the future. And that way you're matching the effort of creation to the effort of filling the jobs. You know, this is starting to drive me a little nuts with regard to the quality of the call on this one. But that seems to be the best way. If you can build a process, you don't have enough to accomplish anything. So at the very least, you have to create a hierarchy. You have to create a process whereby you're making progress, and then you use that progress to justify further investment to continue the progress. Most governments don't do it that way. They try to address problems like this broadly, and invariably they underfund them. The progress that is expected doesn't happen. People lose faith in the government, and it becomes a vicious cycle. So a lot of fixing this problem has to do with creating success early on, and then using that success to draw broad changes, to drive broad changes that will eventually reduce the problem to a manageable state.
Thank you.
That's right.
Professor Talib, can you hear me? Yes, you want to add some point?
Yes, I can hear you. No, I just wanted to confirm what Rob said. I think what we need to do is have government policies that encourage investors to engage with the local community. The local communities are the backbone of our investors. They're the backbone of creating jobs. You can't create jobs simply by saying I've came here and I've created 10,000 jobs. That's not going to work. It will work for a while, but it won't work forever. It's not sustainable. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Professor Talib. Professor David Smith, one point I just want to add, like, what do you think about this entrepreneurship, especially startup and different initiative actually youth community taking right now? Yes, government also provide funding and support for startup communities, but there are many failure from the startup communities. Is it helpful to solve this unemployment problem, or is there any better strategy we have for make it more successful, this startup uh, uh, like creations and these things? Do you have any kind of strategy for them?
Well, startup and entrepreneurship is actually a critical part of the business ecosystem. If you go back and look 100 years ago in the United States at the companies that made up the top of the industrial food chain on the stock exchange and others, many of those are not around anymore. And so if we were static in our companies, we would be in much worse shape than we are with that. So you have to look at the economics and the business environment as a cyclical food chain that continues to grow, change, and adapt to what's there. I mean, if you go back 35 years ago, there were no web developers. There were no data scientists. There were no software architects that could do things. Whole industries of the wireless data devices, the wireless smartphones, the satellite-based internet providers, they weren't here. So you wouldn't have those today if it was not for entrepreneurship. And the very good thing about entrepreneurship is you can separate entrepreneurship and have them, some of them look at the big problems. You can have some of them look at ways to solve regional challenges as well. Some of the more interesting entrepreneurs that I've seen in some of our accelerators are ones that are not going for a global market today, because that is where most entrepreneurs tend to focus. But they're making very successful companies solving things that the local culture, the local environment, and the other things do as well. But what is really funny with entrepreneurship is you often find entrepreneurs in a country, in a region, that are spread out tackling similar problems. So you have the ability with some enhanced communications, many times help facilitated by either industry groups or government, making available what other people are doing. And you see them beginning to partner together, joint venture together, acquiring the other ones, doing a merger of equals to grow much larger companies too, and be more successful with taking unemployment off the streets at that time. The other thing that you begin to see as you increase the entrepreneurship, it enhances the education standards, and it, through the political environment, helps create new empowerment approaches. One of the key roles, I believe, of government economic policy should be to create more empowerment to have people be able to affect more change. And that empowerment is not just education, it's access to facilities, it's access to know-how. Where I've seen very successful transformations that have dramatically affected unemployment is they've created what I call a know-how network, in which other folks like George Kosmeski called a know-how network. And it's the internship, it's the mentorship, but it goes broader. It's helping some of the accounting firms, the legal firms, others like that understand that they have an obligation to provide some of their knowledge back to help the community growth, to help entrepreneurs grow. And it's taking part of their expertise and putting back into this know-how network. It's even surprised me. I've seen government officials really step up as part of a know-how network to help, particularly companies that are bringing in large employment bases or entrepreneurs growing that can affect that as well. They are taking and assigning people within the government to help facilitate the rapid process through the rules and regulations that inhibit startups, that inhibit large growth. And so establishing this know-how network across the ecosystem is one of the ways that you really can go and help enhance the movement from unemployment to employment.
And it helps self-employment as well. Self-employment is important. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Professor Donalds, what do you want to add for today's discussion?
Well,
I have one point in mind. Yes, because right now, actually, sometimes we are discussing, maybe it takes long period of time to solve this unemployment problem. But right now, many people actually in trouble, even though we are observing that even many people go for suicide because of this pandemic and depression. Even many people died, many people lose their job. But if we go for a short period of time, let's say 1 month, 2 months, or 3 months, how we can solve this problem? Is there any strategy? Is there any things we can introduce that we can solve, let's say, in between our community's unemployment problem? Because everything we are discussing, it's a long period of time. Now people are in trouble, definitely are in trouble. Even example, in Malaysia, I'm observing that people open food bank. It's mean that many people actually, like, they do not have job, they do not have food. It's in a critical problem. So what is the strategy in short period of time we can solve this problem, if we have?
Well, I think in Malaysia, I think we really need to adopt different attitudes about. I really can't effectively answer the question from Malaysia, but I think Malaysia is a very advanced, very wealthy country, not entirely different than the United States. In the United States, we have food banks, we have absolute grueling poverty. There are millions of people that live on $1 a day in the United States. So think about that. I mean, in the United States, everything's 10 times as expensive as it is, say, in Mexico next door. But in countries where they have high unemployment, like France, they have higher unemployment than we do. It's probably 8.5%. And they have a social safety net where they will give people enough food and help them have housing. And just in Finland, they do. In the Nordic countries, they do. All over the world, if you can afford it, there's this attitude, like one of the panelists comes up with, which is the idea that, if you help somebody, then they're going to be lazy and they aren't going to work. But work is satisfying. Work is something that gives you, makes you somebody, makes you part of society. I love what Kihil Gibran said. If you love your work, work is love made beautiful, love made visible. Work is love made visible. And I love that line, because I think there's a lot about that the work that you do makes you part of everything. And I can't see any way, except for the people that are making the money in society, to be able to help the people who are struggling. And that's what governments ideally are for. They're ways that we collectively do things that we wouldn't be able to do on our own. And I honestly can't think of any other solution. and it does work all over the world. I want to mention that France is the most productive country. French workers are the most productive in the world. So, and another, as you said, they're all mostly long-term solutions. I want to point out what others have said about transportation. One of the problems with French unemployment is there's no way for people to get to the suburbs to the city where there's jobs. There isn't enough transportation. And that happens all over the United States, Los Angeles, Chicago, all over the United States, there's mediocre or poor public transportation. So people would love to have jobs, but they can't afford an Uber. But I think the key is the idea of somehow supporting, it doesn't take that long for somebody to be able to go to start a business that's actually getting them some money. But, you know, as I said, in the very short term, I can't think of anything except for the people who have helping the people who don't have, because you can't just turn a switch and tomorrow have jobs for people. But one of the things I think is incredibly important is the way we treat women, because in Bangladesh, some of the best entrepreneurs are women. They start textile businesses and other kinds of businesses. So I think that's incredibly important. And I think another important thing is the regulation, because in the United States, the creative destruction has dropped quite a bit. And companies are lasting longer and longer, and they're consolidating, and they're winding up basically as monopolies. And because they're monopolies, they're raising the prices of things. And we're in a little bit of trouble that way. So governments have to think about what Dr. Talib said, is that we want to find ways of getting resources and investments into the individual communities. And I think the best way to do that investment could, at this point, consist of food and help for housing. But in the longer term, the investment needs to help entrepreneurs. And I've always said that startups start up to solve problems. That's one of the first things you ask if you're checking to fund a startup is, what problem are you trying to solve? And you can't sit in a city somewhere and know what the problems are in a village. So what we need to do is to be able to help the people in all the local areas so that they can start the businesses that serve them. And what goes back to transportation is that if you have a small village, the market that you have is so small that you may not be able to, you need to get money into the village. So you need to be able to take whatever you're doing and connect with the places that have resources, and be able to get the resources, money and other resources into those locations. And that requires transportation and thought about that as well. And so it kind of all fits together, is that we have to get resources to the people that need them, and respect that they're going to be able to use the resources in an appropriate way, whether it's surviving while they're not working, starting a business, whatever they're going to do, we have to trust and that there are people that are going to be able to help make that happen. And I want to emphasize again, if women aren't participating, you're losing half of the workforce, and that studies have shown that women are better leaders than men. And the companies that are run by women grow faster, people are happier. Countries that are run by women, Finland is completely run by women, and it's the happiest country in the world.
New Zealand.
Their financial,
New Zealand.
New Zealand is, Yeah, New Zealand also. I mean,
Yes.
in Finland, the prime minister and the entire cabinet are women under 35, except for one. One is over 35,
Yes.
but and they're brilliant. So we really need to. I think that's all I'm going to say right now. But
Thank you, Professor Donald. Actually, this is one of my favorite subject because one of my PhD on glass ceiling factors, like gender discrimination reduction. This area, I finished my work. I have different journals and publications and different works. This is really important because we need to add man and woman. Even glass ceiling is a major problem right now. Even the COVID situation actually, women heavily affect from home and abroad everywhere. So Mr. James, what do you want to add? Then we directly want to go for the solution for today's discussion, because already many audience, they are sharing our content as well as they are discussing, because this is very important topic today, and we love to more focus on what Dr. Talib said, the grassroots level, more micro initiative, and more fast initiative we want.
Thank you, Sharif, for this wonderful opportunity. This will have to serve as my concluding remarks because I do have to go. But I just admire the way that you assemble a panel to talk about very important subjects. And there's a couple of things that just came up for me. I want to do a shout out to Susan Polgar, who was the first woman to earn the Grandmaster title based on merit. And chess was a male-dominated sport, and it was an accomplishment, a glass ceiling that she broke through. She was Hungarian-based, born in Budapest, but people are looking at this game entirely different, and girls are starting to play chess all over the world now, and because of the examples that she set. So I totally agree with that. And also, based on what Donald said, I guess I have to say, change my old thinking and don't trust anyone over 35 now. It's like, we used to say don't trust them over 30, but now 35, okay, that's you want someone younger than 35 and female in charge. I can get behind that. There's short-term solutions. We all struggle with this, but I say infrastructure. Just keep building. You put people into jobs that actually matter. In the United States, we have bridges that are failing. There are so many things that are roads that have to be repaired. There's so much about our airports are dismal. But there are things that we want to do, but we don't have the political will to do them. But if we can just start rebuilding, because all sorts of jobs flow from that. And you put cash into people's pockets, and then they have money to spend. It just seems to me that's the short term. But the long term solution really is you have to do systems type thinking. And one of the things you can do is reverse engineer on a local basis, on a community, whatever country you're in, whatever language you're speaking, it doesn't matter. You think about, what do we need? And then you ask yourself, what are the skill sets that we need to get what we need? And then you say, well, how do I get those skill sets? And this is a systematic way of thinking about this. Acquire the skill sets, and start with yourself. Acquire the skill sets that you need, that your community needs, wherever you are. And then when you acquire those skills, apply them to what your community needs. And you will find that if you have a team, you can do more than you can do alone. So encourage others in your sphere of influence to do the same thing. Figure out what you need. What's the skill set that you need to meet the needs of your community? And then how do I go about acquiring that skill set? These are the productive ways in a young life to make a difference in your community. And it's all about community, because we're not in this alone. We're all in this together. But we have to start with ourselves, then our community, and then who knows where we'll end. Maybe one world, one day, maybe, I don't know. But this is what I would encourage people to start thinking about. These are the main things that I wanted to say, but I think there's an old saying that, people live lives of quiet desperation. And I'd like to update it to say, what we want is lives of quiet dignity. We want everyone to live with dignity. And so many of us do not. And so if you want to live lives with, want people to live lives with dignity, then you have to pay living wages. You know, we have the right to pursue happiness, but we do not have the right to start a business if we cannot pay living wages. You know, and yet so many of the businesses start up that paying as low amount of wage as possible so that they could be more profitable. Now, this is reversed thinking. This is not reverse engineering. This is backwards thinking. You know, pay living wages. And then you have the right to start a business. And if you cannot, you're just exploiting the desperation of others. So, you know, change your mindset and change not only the way you think, but change your heart as well. We all want people to live lives of quiet dignity. So thank you again for this topic, Sharif, and I apologize for having to leave. I would love to hear the rest, but I must go.
Thank you, Mr. James. Professor Talib, you are very experienced with your a lot of activities and different organizations around the world you are contributing right now. But from the practical fields, we are observing many people actually struggling right now only for unemployment. Definitely healthcare system is a major problem right now, and beside that, many people losing jobs, many people losing income. And every day actually we are getting a lot of calls, emails, like messages, text every time that how we can work. Yes, World Talent Economy Forum, our ability is limited, but with our limitations we are trying to help as much as possible, especially youth community, for creating more employment and other things. But you are global leaders, you people are global leaders, you have enough ability to help these grassroots level people. So what is your observation, what we can do, how we can work together, especially how we can save this world and save this community?
It's a political will and the political systems. Now I want to speak on the behalf of the developing world, because in the developing world we're trying to imitate the developed world, but we don't have the ability to do that, unfortunately. So when Professor Donald or people talk about subsidy is not a solution. Subsidy is good to have when you are a rich man, but richness, even in developed countries, is concentrated in the hands of the capitalists and the people that have the money. They're not going to give it to people. And governments cannot keep paying people. That's not what governments are for. Governments are for laying policies and encouraging people to move in a certain direction. So I'm very, very pessimistic about the world the way it is now, but optimistic about what the COVID might bring us changes. Because what COVID would do, COVID would allow people to rise up now. People are hungry, people are desperately needing for jobs. They will rise up and they will change things. And the change are going to be for the better, because we need a more fair, more equitable, and a more just world. That's for sure. Now, with regard to women, it's a very important topic. It's a shame that in 2021 we're still talking about the position of women in this world. We can't keep doing that forever. Women are better managers than men, we know that. We've managed as men the world for 10,000 years. Look what we've let it arrive at. I don't think we've done a good job to show. Women are doing a much better job than we are. But regardless of that, we're all human beings. We can't just keep talking about this, breaking the ceilings for women or for poor people. People are people, after all. And work in dignity is an objective. Because even those companies that think they're successful are not sustainable unless they provide jobs with dignity. Because dignity is a very, very important element here. I think that's what I want to say at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Rob.
So we're moving to closing remarks now, I think. So if at the first part of trying to fix a complex problem, you really have to understand the nature of the problem. And certainly decades ago, that would be very difficult. You'd have to hand survey by the time you're done with the surveys or census or whatever. It would probably be out of date and you couldn't move. But with technology and the ability to connect people, we can get a better sense of where the problems are, the nature of the problems, and we can communicate back to those individuals information they need to correct their own skill levels and move forward. And this kind of means that if you really want to fix unemployment in the modern world, you really have to connect your population. You have to instrument them to a degree that you can understand their problems, and so that they feel that they're being heard. And they have to be able to have access to the information that they need, whether it's to find a job that they're qualified for in their own area or some other, or to enhance their education and background, so they can go after jobs that they now currently can't approach. But if you don't first make contact with the population, if you don't first analyze the data, if you don't first understand the nature of the problem, then what you're likely going to do is deal with the symptoms. In the United States, we had something called the EEOC, the Equal Economic Opportunity Commission, and it was perhaps one of the dumbest things that we ever rolled forward. It wasn't because the intent wasn't good, but it was because we tried to address a symptom, and the symptom at that time was the lack of diversity in the workforce. And so what the EEOC did is try to force that diversity, but the problem really was the education systems were not diverse themselves. And so the systems that were in place were actually working. They were putting people in jobs that were qualified for the jobs, but the minorities weren't qualified for the jobs. But instead of fixing the qualification problem, they tried to force fit diversity, and now putting people that were unqualified in jobs created a huge amount of resistance and organized a rather substantial back push on the diversity efforts. And a lot of people were put into jobs that had titles where they didn't do anything. They were resented in the jobs, and of course, an awful lot of people, minorities, actually gamed the system, which seemed to justify the folks fighting the change's beliefs that the minorities were inherently inferior to their peers, which once again worked against the goal of creating diversity. So you really have to think through and analyze the problem and go to the heart of the problem, which often is education, lack of communication, and people believing things that are absolutely false. And if you can't correct that, you're going to have a heck of a time fixing this problem, because one, you won't know the nature of the problem, you won't know the cause, you won't resource the cause, and the populace won't believe or follow what it is you're doing, because you'll have a history of not performing. Success breeds success. Failure breeds distrust. And if your populace doesn't believe or trust you, you can't change it, and you certainly can't implement lasting change. So the first step to this problem is really making sure your populace is connected, making sure their information sources are trusted and not corrupting them, because you can have a problem with third-party elements coming in, and we're having a fairly serious problem here in the United States right now with offshore governments corrupting our information sources. And so it has to be free-flowing information, but you also you have to make sure it's not abused, so that your populace is turned against you. In any case, it begins with analysis, it ends with communication and a systematic, strategic effort to address the core causes of the problem, and then you can fix it. If you're not willing to do that, this is going to be something you're going to discuss, and it's never going to go anyplace.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Professor Donald, what's your concluding?
I want to say that what you asked in the question in the very, very short term, and I also don't really believe that the people that have the resources are going to have any desire to share them. That's just not the way it works. I will say that in Finland, once I was at a big meeting, and there was, I think even the prime minister was there at the time. He was a guy at the time, but many top officials were there. It was a fairly large meeting of maybe 100 people or something. We were in an auditorium. We started talking about innovation, and somebody asked, "Why don't we have Bill Gates here?" And somebody like Bill Gates, and somebody stood up and he says, "Because we wouldn't let it happen. We don't allow people to be like that. We are taxed."
That's right.
In Finland, they did the most amazing thing. If you get a traffic ticket, they look at how wealthy you are, and they charge you a punitive fine based on your wealth. So there's people who've gotten traffic tickets for $50,000. I mean, $300 is nothing to somebody. If you really want them to think about obeying traffic laws, you make it so it's actually significant enough to get their attention. And it's possible to do that, but just as Dr. Talib said, the way it happened in Finland wasn't that all of a sudden the rich people said, oh, let's be egalitarian and try and come up with a society that's fair for everybody. They had a brutal civil war. The country was basically dominated by Swedish landlords because Sweden had actually owned Finland for a long period of time. And it was so brutal that they were actually taking Finns and putting them in concentration camps in Finland. And that was so recent. When you go to Finland, you can meet people who will tell you, my grandfather told me about this happening. And that when it may be, as Dr. Talib was pointing out, that the only way to make these changes is that enough people have to get together in the country and just make the changes. And it might not be simple, but ultimately Estonia did a similar thing. After they broke up from the Soviet Union, they didn't have a government. And I talked to one of the people, she was a young woman, that worked on the committee that got together and they looked at governments all over the world, and they decided they designed a government that would be fair as much as possible. That's a longer term solution when you ask the question in the very short term. But I also want to say something amusing. A few years ago, the world poker champion was a 17-year-old Norwegian girl, and she just cleaned everybody's clocks. She was so much better than anybody else. She just totally swamped them. So, and that was also a male-dominated area.
Profession.
So, yeah, a profession, and she did so much. It was one of those wonderful things that wakes us up. It's interesting though. Every time we talk about somebody who came from a poor environment and got wealthy, a woman that was really successful, the reason we're talking about it is because it's rare, and I definitely think that's something that's important to change. We need to redesign some of the governments, and we need to start working together. And I like the idea of infrastructure because it's what I said about transportation. Dr. Talib should have a good internet connection. I mean, something is going wrong here. So those are basically what I'm saying is that we need to make some changes. Government should be for us. They should be a way of us acting collectively to do things that we need. And so often they become ways of entrenching power. It's certainly happening in the United States. There are people in the United States that work at Walmart, and Walmart pays so little that they have to have government assistance as well to survive. And it's not sustainable. It won't work. And so hopefully in countries that have any choice about this, they'll look to successful models like Finland.
Thank you. Professor David Smith, again, what's your concluding remarks today? And we are actually looking for emergency solutions for unemployment as well as this healthcare system improvement. We do not have choice, because when you see your family members die, your friends dying, many young people even died right now. It's 1,000 people dying. Even it's horrible. Even Malaysia, I know their healthcare system is good, but they do not have ICU right now. Country like Indonesia, they have to take decision who will alive and who will die. They do not have choice. They have resource limitations. And many young community, youth community, I'm very emotional for them, because regularly they call me, they feel very very insecure, because of many youth communities actually come to Malaysia for study purpose. They are in trouble. Not only in Malaysia, we are regularly communicate with many developing nations. So we need to fix this problem. We cannot sit only for the governments. Maybe government has limitations. So how we, the global community, we can work together, we can solve the problem, and we can take some emergency initiative for this problem.
I agree with what has been said recently. Rob is right on that. One of the things you need to do is look at connectivity. I mean, and we're seeing advanced changes there. I mean, I would like Professor Talib to be in the beta program for Starlink, or to go to Skynet, and that would probably help with some of his internet problems. But those same ways to deliver that type of connectivity are applicable across particularly rural areas of countries as well too, to help address it. Most of the unemployment you have in rural areas is not reported. So you have chronic unemployment there that just gets swept underneath the rug as you look at that. The understanding of what's unemployment is not a uniform definition. And there will never be a time where there is zero unemployment. And so you begin to see that. One of the impacts of unemployment is the lack of lifelong learning. And lifelong learning is a way to combat unemployment. I'll give you an example of how that can kind of work. I was an executive at two of the large consortia in the United States, MCC and Cimatech. And one of the things that we did when they located in the city where they were headquartered is they went to the major research university, and they endowed professorships there in chairs. But then they also went to more dispersed regional universities and did the same thing. But they didn't stop there. They also went to the community colleges and put in place training programs at the community colleges. And today, I would say we would do that at boot camps, particularly in the software technology areas. So much of programming and other things like that, the need for a college degree is no longer necessary as I begin to look at skills like that. The other thing that's going to dramatically impact unemployment is one of the fallouts from COVID. What COVID has taught us is geography is not important in many instances in your ability to work. Increasingly, people work where they want to work from. I have a number of friends who have moved to places like Thailand, who've moved to Costa Rica, who've moved to Mexico and other places to work because they have a lower cost of living there, but they are working because increasingly the need to go into an office is not necessary, except in manufacturing and some of the personal service industries. And so that's going to change unemployment. In some instances, it's going to make the competition for jobs higher because you could get a higher quality of work if geography is not as important. But that complicates the whole issue of unemployment again with how you do programs to help combat unemployment. You know, one of the things as you look at it is how do you create a creative, positive, but yet still competitive environment to address unemployment? How can I do it to create new jobs, new companies? How can I take it to grow opportunities there? How do I pull the pieces together? And I think you do that through very broad-based collaboration. You got to have the government step up to say, I'm part of the solution, I'm not all the solution. You have to have industry step up and say, I'm part of the solution, I'm not all of the solution. You have to have academia step up and say, I'm part of the solution, I'm not all of the solution. And you have to have your healthcare community and your social services community step up and say, because of unemployment, it helps contribute to poor health. It helps contribute to mental health issues. It helps contribute to children, spouses, not having the opportunities or abuse because of the chronic unemployment. All of those have to be addressed to be an effective program that could be undertaken. And it has to be done across that systems approach. The other impact that's going to hit unemployment is as the healthcare system improves and as we live longer, you're going to see retirement ages go up and up and up. Well, that's going to create less opportunity to enter the workforce too. So you have to put in place a system to continually grow the workforce in different ways, as well as to help maximize the opportunity for the older unemployed as well. So it is a complex problem, but those are ones that really are the place where you get innovation. If it's really easy to fix, innovation's low. The harder it is to fix, innovation goes higher. And that's what's needed to solve this problem.
That's right.
And thank you, Sharif, so much for letting me be part of it today.
Thank you, sir. Professor Talib, you want to add any point for our audience?
Not really. What I want to say is that I've enjoyed this tremendously, and that I've learned a lot from Rob, from David, from Donald, and all the rest. Now, the thing is, the world has to change now. The world cannot stay the way it is. COVID has uncovered so many of our defaults. And that's one of the silver linings of COVID. We have to admit that. Now, how to do this quickly is very difficult. But the issue is not just one of jobs, it's one of livelihood now. People need to live. Jobs are secondary things. Jobs are passion.
Mm-hmm.
What we need to do is make sure that people are living, continue to live.
Mm-hmm.
Because as David said, the workforce is going to grow. Population is going to grow. There's nothing to stop that. Nothing is going to stop the growth of the population. I don't think we can follow any path that wants to reduce the growth of population. That's not going to work. So what we need to do is make sure that we grow, but we grow in a sustainable way. We grow in a healthy way. And we need governments that are very sensitive to us. We need to revisit our governance system. For sure. That's what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for joining today's session, and thank you for all of your support, especially from our speakers, because they are the hero for our youth community. They are the real model for our youth communities, and with your knowledge, with your expertise, you are supporting all of our initiative. We are like, yes, we have our limitation. We have a lot of limitation, but we are trying our level best to solve the problem. Even recently, we are trying to train the youth community. Tomorrow we have we will train in the African community, Ogba Foundations. Beside that, we are also trying to create more job opportunity, especially for the youth. And beside that, for healthcare system, we need doctors because we are connecting different hospitals, because they do not have enough expert. Even though they do not have ICU, they do not have oxygen, many problems they have. I do not know if anybody want to donate oxygen, or anybody want to support with doctors, with your medicine or anything to the developing nation. This is not for me or for my personal uses. We have our collaborations with different developing nations hospital. You can support it, but things are getting worse. Thousand people dying. I do not know what will be the future of the global community, but we have to hardwire, and we definitely, we need to be, how should I say, we need great leaders. and we need leaders like Professor Talib, Professor Rob, Professor David, Professor Donald, who can create a great plans and who can request the global community to work together. I believe that after the Second World War, this will be the most trouble situation right now we are facing, and we have to, like, developed nations has dependency on developing nations. Developing nations also has dependency on developed nations. We live in the global village, so we need to work together. We need to support each others. We need to think properly what we can do. It's not all about that I am the best, so I can save. Nobody's know who will survive or who will die. So please help the developing nations, help the global communities, work together. We do not want to see any war or any political turmoils or anything. We want to see a peaceful world. So thank you, Professor Talib, for your continuous support, and especially the Professor Rob, Professor Donalds, and Professor David, and we develop our board of advisors, because your knowledge, your experience is very, very helpful for us. Very, very helpful for the global community. So the more you can guide us, we have energetic team, so we can do more work. So we can do the field work, and you can guide us, and you can give different intellectual thoughts and strategy for our global community. So thank you everyone for joining today's session. I'm little bit emotional because the COVID, I lost my uncle, I lost my auntie. So I know that those who are dying, what the present situations of their family and everything. So even why my auntie died, because of that she do not get enough medical support. So that is the reality. So
where was she living? Where was she living, Sharif?
She live in Bangladesh.
Bangladesh, yes.
Yes. So healthcare system is very bad after the India, Bangladesh in bad condition, Malaysia is still bad condition, Indonesia also in bad condition, many countries in very in trouble situations. And every day we are getting lot of requests, but with our limited credibility, we are trying to support everyone as much as possible. But your knowledge is really helpful for World Talent Economy Forum, really helpful for the youth community, for the government, and for the corporation. Thank you, Professor Talib, Professor Rob, Professor Donalds, and Professor David for joining.
Thank you, Sharif.
Thank you, Sharif.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good job.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. Bye.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Love being.